I think it just will be much harder for banks to continue to play this game where they're using unallocated paper derivatives, which will dramatically affect the balance sheet. And so, yeah, I think this is an environment where we could expect to see much higher prices after the Basel III, maybe not immediately, but what it ought to do is make it much more difficult for these players to continue to suppress the price with unallocated paper, especially if they're standing for delivery, and especially if it starts to really negatively affect their balance sheet. This will become a game, I think, where that kind of position is considered foolhardy. So yes, ultimately in the long run, I think it's one of these deals where we can't expect it to happen just like that the moment the switch is flipped, but I think it is a trend that we are seeing where these banks already, it appears as though they're realizing this in gold. We haven't seen them capitulate in silver yet. The conventional wisdom is that gold and silver drop due to easing of the Israeli-Iran tensions, you know, the signing of the temporary or hopefully the long-lasting ceasefire, but that's not what it was. I mean, you had options expiration, you have the end of the quarter, which options expiration was today, mind you, and I think it's interesting that they really had a hard time keeping it at or near $36 an ounce. And if you look at the amount of contracts that they had trying to keep it below that level, it's really quite incredible. There were 76,617 short contracts to keep the price down. It's an all-time record. And here it is. It's right back up. The demand, the physical demand at that level is extraordinary. But to see gold down $100 since June 12th and silver $1 lower, that's not a reaction to geopolitical events or a cooling of the narrative. This isn't a natural correction. It's a managed decline, and it started Sunday night, and it went all the way down to today. But we have, not only do we have the end of quarter and the options expiration, you have the July contract, which will go off the board, I believe, on Monday, the first day of delivery requests. And so we've been seeing tremendous deliveries come out of COMEX. I would expect to see that continue. Look, the prices were reacting long before any conflict had arisen in the Middle East, certainly the one that we're focusing on. But since President Trump was elected, you've had almost 820 tons of gold stand for delivery done again, and somewhere in the neighborhood of 9,000 tons of silver stand for delivery. The trend is not stopping, quite frankly, and you can see the amount of effort that the banks are using to keep it down. I mean, it's extraordinary when you figure each one of these contracts on silver are 5,000 ounces, and they're trading 76,617 contracts short to keep the price down. That reeks of desperation, and it reeks of stupidity, if you ask me, because you have a good portion of the world who is using that effort, that manipulative effort, to stand for delivery and rewrite the narrative. You could say the same thing is happening with platinum at the same time. So I think that how well gold and silver have held up through all of this is noteworthy, to say the least. So yeah, I'm actually quite surprised and quite optimistic that this correction is behind us, and that the amount of effort needed to hold it down is something that has to have the banks on their heels and very concerned.
Despite media spin blaming the price dip on Middle East ceasefires, deeper forces are at play. Massive short contracts over 76,000 on silver alone were deployed ahead of quarterly closes and options expiration. These manipulative efforts failed to suppress prices long-term, revealing not a market reaction, but a coordinated strategy to control perception, liquidity, and momentum.
It is, on one hand, it is the central banks. It's what it is to me more than, I mean, that's a good question, but what it is, it's that the gold and silver disappearing from the exchanges, that's the physical liquidity upon which this entire house of cards is based. And if you're pulling the liquidity out because it's standing for delivery, that's a problem. What you see in many cases is what's called a short squeeze, where the traders do not have the ounces of gold that standing behind the contracts that they have. And So they have to rush to get it in order to cover. That represents a short squeeze. So it is the buying of the central banks. It is the buying of the sovereign wealth funds. It is the buying of the biggest money in the world, the sophisticated money in the world, who is able to accumulate and stand for delivery, that is affecting the price at that level. And yes, it is exacerbated by these moments of panic covering in an environment where we continue to see delivery requests. And that's something that I think people need to really understand, that this is something that never, ever happened before. David Jensen does an amazing job on Substack of explaining this. He talks about, look, the LBMA is trading 200 million ounces of gold per day and 3.43 billion ounces of silver, with a B, per day. That's almost 4 times global mine supply per day, annual global mine supply per day, standing behind somewhere in the neighborhood of, I don't know, under 200 million ounces. That is the float. I think it's much less than that right now. So you're talking 12 plus times the float. What you're witnessing right now is a desperate effort by the West, who has always been able to easily manipulate the price of gold and silver through levered contracts, because no one ever challenged them by standing for delivery. And that's really the difference. And these deliveries continue to happen across the globe. So yeah, I think this should be looked at as a very optimistic and hopeful development, where they have to expend that kind of effort to hold the price down, and yet it really didn't go down very much, didn't dip below 36, and if it did for a very, very short period of time, and here we are right back above it again. I wouldn't want to be as stupid and irresponsible as these banks are, having that kind of a short position in an environment where much of the world is challenging it through delivery. So yeah, it's to his question, I think a lot of it is short covering, but it's short covering because these players, whether it be central banks or sovereign wealth funds, are standing for delivery. That's what's different.
A global shift is unfolding as sovereign funds and central banks demand physical metal instead of settling in paper. Nearly 820 tons of gold and 9,000 tons of silver have stood for delivery since 2016. This isn't a normal market correction, it's a structural battle. The West's unallocated paper system is facing existential stress from actual demand for tangible bullion.
You'll see it immediately. I think you're beginning to see it. I think you're beginning to see, maybe this is part of the reason we're seeing so much in the way of deliveries to back these naked contracts, to have the physical. I think it just will be much harder for banks to continue to play this game where they're using unallocated paper derivatives, which will dramatically affect the balance sheet. And so, yeah, I think this is an environment where we could expect to see much higher prices after the Basel III, maybe not immediately, but what it ought to do is make it much more difficult for these players to continue to suppress the price with unallocated paper, especially if they're standing for delivery, and especially if it starts to really negatively affect their balance sheet. This will become a game, I think, where that kind of position is considered foolhardy. So yes, ultimately in the long run, I think it's one of these deals where we can't expect it to happen just like that the moment the switch is flipped. But I think it is a trend that we are seeing where these banks already, it appears as though they're realizing this in gold. We haven't seen them capitulate in silver yet, but I think that's coming. And quite frankly, to have these unallocated naked positions against the backdrop of global demand and global offtake is as stupid as a mud wall in a rainstorm. And I think it will have a dramatic effect. Maybe not all at once, maybe not at first, but over time, absolutely it will.
The BRICS nations are quietly executing a financial revolution. Their new Enbridge settlement platform enables cross-border CBDC trade, bypassing SWIFT, dollars, euros, and pounds. Countries like Vietnam, Indonesia, and Mexico are aligning, with BRICS allies covering 90% of humanity and 75% of global GDP. This gold-backed network threatens to rewrite the rules of international trade.
The BRICS are concerned a lot of it will rear its head over the next several weeks. But as I've mentioned to you before, to me, the biggest development is Sergei Lavrov coming out and saying that the bridge network, their cross-border settlement payment system, which is Enbridge, will be open to non-BRICS members. And that is something that has gotten no attention. To my knowledge, I'm the only one screaming about it, but it's massive. Because what you really have are many, many, many countries and alliances that are indirectly aligned with the BRICS nations, in particular China. Whether you're talking the Belt Road, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, or the Eurasian Economic Union, those entities alone added onto the BRICS equates to roughly 90% of human population, the majority of global GDP, the majority of global commodity production, refining, the majority of the manufacturing capacity on the globe. You have Vietnam, who is just fully applied. Of course, China and Vietnam being two of the main manufacturing hubs in the world. You have Indonesia, who has just fully been admitted in and massive stash of nickel and rare earth. You have Mexico, who is now saying that they want to be one of the 45 countries who want to attend the BRICS meetings. You are seeing a growing alliance. And so, yes, I think the biggest thing to take away from it is the admission by Lavrov that these countries will be able to use the BRICS settlement system, which is trading central bank digital currencies across the bridge technology, which is Enbridge, without the interference of SWIFT, settling in gold. We are seeing more and more rumblings coming out of the Shanghai Metals Exchange to open up exchanges across the network, across Africa and Asia and South America, to where that they will be able to internationalize gold deliveries from the Shanghai Exchange. The idea being we trade our local currencies over the Enbridge, settle any imbalances in gold. Now, the pushback to many of these statements would have been the BRICS alliance is not big enough. Okay, fine. You add in all of these entities which are BRICS aligned. The Belt Road alone is 75% of human population, 50% of global GDP. You add in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the Eurasian Economic Union to this, on top of the Belt Road to the BRICS, and you are talking a massive, massive swath of human population, of global production, of commodities, of global manufacturing, of military might.
From Japan's yen reversal to BRICS digital settlement ecosystem, de-dollarization is accelerating. The Japanese carry trade is unwinding, dollar demand weakening, and Western banks look increasingly cornered. As more nations opt out of dollar dependence, the real story isn't market volatility, it's the quiet but seismic shift toward a multipolar world order, with gold and silver at its core.
And I think it's something that would be a huge mistake to underestimate, with the stated goal coming out of Brazil being to find a new settlement system that bypasses the dominance of the dollar and the SWIFT system. So to me, that is what I am looking to see, and that's a big one, a really, really big one. And you'll note that they're very keen in saying that this technology, this BRICS technology, the Enbridge technology, is not compatible at dollars, pounds, and euro. So you're pigeonholing the West, and you are opening this up to the majority of the nations around the globe that are underdeveloped, that are resource rich, and that are looking to find a way not only to improve their standard of living, but to do so in an environment that perhaps is one that is more about cooperation rather than coercion, and converting to a dollar that has been very strong has been very difficult for these nations. As far as the Japanese carry trade is concerned, yeah, I mean, I'm surprised we haven't seen more fallout from it yet, but this is a situation that is unwinding. Of course, the whole premise of the carry trade was that institutions or countries or people could invest, buy or borrow in Japanese yen at next to nothing, at zero rates, and then convert to dollars and buy dollar-based assets, whether it be cryptocurrencies, whether it be NVIDIA stock or Apple, whether it be treasuries. And that's unwinding as the yen goes higher and the rates go higher. That remains to be seen how that all plays out. And even the wild card, do they actually entertain joining BRICS, as people like Jim Willey have thought perhaps is in the cards? So there's a lot of fluidity. Then again, the difference between this administration and last is the last administration, their actions were too stupid to be stupid. And therefore, it was obvious what they were trying to do. This administration, their actions are more subtle and maybe even a little bit more confrontational, but all leading to the same thing, and that is an increase in de-dollarization, an increase in unification by these countries, safety in numbers. And I think when you look at what's happened with Iran, and some people might think, well, maybe it's a little bit more than meets the eye. Maybe this is a shot across the bow with the BRICS, as in fact they are full BRICS members and are full Shanghai Cooperation Organization members. This will not be something easy, and I think these nations understand. You look at India, you look at Saudi Arabia, who seem to be straddling a little bit both sides. That's understandable. Until everything is set and everything is unified, this will be a slow-moving, yet developing event. And I think people need to not focus too much on the immediacy of something like the BRICS meeting, but look at the pieces that continue to be put together. And as far as I'm concerned, this has not stopped. In fact, this is the biggest piece of BRICS bullish news that I've heard in the 4 years I've been covering it, and that is that they have the ability to offer this network to non-BRICS nations, with the exception of the euro, the pound, and the dollar. I think that is a massive shot back across the Western bow, and something I'm looking forward to see unfold over the next few weeks as that meeting starts here in the first week of July.